Would you be so kind as to introduce yourself, give your name, pronouns, social location, and if you care to, any astrological placements?
Sure. So I am Rose Whip. I normally use they, them pronouns. I identify as non-binary, which is pretty awesome over here. And what was the last part of the question?
Social location, like, the identities that are important to you, and then astrological placements.
Ooh, okay. Um, so as far as astrological placements, I am an Aries sun, I am a Taurus moon, and I am a Pisces rising.
Nice.
Um, so I'm really curious what that means for some folks. In, in terms of the other part of the question,
hmm
um, gosh, there's so many. I feel like
hmm
there are so many.
Yeah.
But anything related to being queer,
Yeah.
anything related to being black,
hmm
anything related to legitimately smashing the patriarchy and white supremacy and everything else under the sun. Um, Basically, anything that opposes oppression is kind of the way I look at it. So, yeah,
I love that. I love that. Awesome. And so you are a burlesque performer,
I
and at
am.
least that's how I primarily know you. Can you describe your journey about getting into burlesque for me?
Sure. I started performing burlesque back in 2014, I believe. Um, and it's funny because a lot of people think that I started with a school or something along those lines, and I actually started by doing amateur nights at Attitudes back in the day. Like, it was just if someone thinks they have the guts to get up here, come on. And after seeing a number of shows, I knew that I wanted to do it. And so
Yeah,
I made my first costume with my wife, and the rest is kind of history in a weird way to say. But yeah, that's how I got my start.
that's awesome. Um, were there any particular struggles that you faced as you were getting started that you want to talk about?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's going to look a little bit different depending on the person, but
Mhm.
um, knowing where to actually start,
Yeah,
um, knowing where to prioritize your time and energy and money.
yeah,
Um, I think so much. I think so much is tied to having good mentors,
hmm
if you can.
yeah,
And for me, I was just like, okay, I think I want to pursue this more, but what does that mean if I want to get serious about it? So I
right.
think I think the main thing was just not having the resources to, you know, plan out how I was going to pursue this altogether, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned like having good mentors.
hmm
Are there any particular mentors along the way that have been super helpful for you? And like, what have you learned on that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So someone that comes to mind off the bat is Abigail Reese.
hmm
I honestly, so she changed her name and now I can't even remember what her name used to be, but I feel
hmm
like a lot of people would probably recognize her by that name as well. She
hmm
comes to mind. Adele Wolf comes to mind.
hmm
Um, I think those people were definitely mentors at the time. Lola Vanilla was a mentor when I first, not when I first started, but once I started going to the school.
hmm
Um, let's see, I'm trying to think. I feel like even if it wasn't intentional, a lot of my peers were mentors in a way
Oh,
because
absolutely.
you know what I mean? It's like maybe they have a skill that I don't have, or maybe there's something that, drew me to them when I saw them perform and I want to learn more about that. So I feel like honestly, my peers have also been mentors in ways that I don't even think they realized. Like right now, I would say a big influence for me is Joey Tiger Lily out of Richmond, Virginia.
Mm,
She's just an amazing person in general.
yeah.
She's like my personal Tinkerbell, I feel like. Just like, I want to protect you and keep you safe always, you know? Always, always. Torlicia Devine, she's out of Indianapolis. She's another person that, man, like I just get inspired by. Yeah, Havoc is
Hmm.
more on the clown side, but like I love Havoc's creativity. So,
Hmm.
you know, that just inspires me to try to do better and figure out what could work for me also, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, you view performing as like collaborative, inspiring each other as opposed to competition, which I think
Oh,
is super important.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, beyond seeing other people perform, listening to music just like I feel sorry for people who don't like music because I don't know what I would do without it. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? And I think for me, seeing other people be creative, regardless of whether it's burlesque or, you know, like other forms of art, like
Hmm.
all of it is just inspiring to me in a way that makes me want to transform it into something that I could do. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Um, that's awesome. Were there any particular like aha moments that come to mind, like with your mentors? Like I know when I was doing drag, there
Hmm.
were several like milestone, like someone showing me something that like brought it up to another level. Do you have
Yeah.
anything like that you'd like to share?
I think so. So I think I knew that I was at least decent
Hmm.
when I started doing what felt good to me
Hmm.
versus doing what I thought people wanted to see. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I've reverted once or twice, you know, and that's just part of a journey, a life journey situation. But like I remember coming up with my DuckTales act, which is one of the oldest acts I have in my arsenal.
Hmm.
It is, it was literally made with like a hot glue gun and a prayer. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
But it ended up getting like booked, you know what I'm saying,
Hmm.
out of town. And I was like, you want this? You want this? You don't want like this sparkly thing in the back? You don't okay. So I think that's when I realized that there's more to it than just whatever's shining the brightest,
Hmm.
right? And that's when I realized that like maybe I can shine on my own without having to, I don't want to say they're crutches, but sometimes having just a ton of sparkly stuff. What's under all of that though?
Hmm.
Like that's what I want to see. That's what I want to get to. So that was the first one. Um, I think once I started headlining, that was another big one that to this day, I'm still just like, little old me over here. I'm just chilling in the back somewhere. You know what I'm saying? So like,
Hmm.
okay, if duty calls, I'm gonna show up. But you know, I just yeah. So that was that, and I think over the course of COVID, the biggest thing has been what do I want to make time for versus
Mm.
doing
Yeah.
everything that's asked of me,
Yeah.
versus you know over committing.
Hmm.
Not necessarily that I won't do a good job, but that I'm going to be so exhausted when I'm done. Was it worth doing all of that?
Hmm.
Did I make it worth it for myself?
Hmm.
Um, and I think over the course of the last 2 years, where I didn't have a choice but to
Yeah.
sit down and think about life and look around a little bit, that's when I realized, okay, I don't have to do everything and I shouldn't do everything. And I want to make sure that I'm also feeling healthy in these environments that I'm choosing to put myself in.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's been a big one for me too. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people have been on that journey as well of learning to
Hmm.
choose what's healthy.
Yep.
Um, have there been any like red flags and green flags in choosing what spaces to grace with your presence.
On that note, I'm just playing. Sort of, but not really. I just feel it's good timing. Yes. So I started entering spaces, I think, more one with folks that I was unfamiliar with. And so I just assumed that because this is like this fantasy world, that I won't have to worry about advocating for myself or, you know, setting boundaries. And, you know, in a weird way, it almost felt as though burlesque for a hot second was outside of reality. Like the same issues that you have at home, you're not going to have there for some reason. In my mind, this made sense at the time, right? But what I realized is, regardless of whether we're talking about a venue or another performer or producer or whatever, the same problems are going to exist everywhere. It comes down to how we navigate that. But one of the things I'd say that has stuck with me the most is the fact that over the course of the past almost 8 years, you know, I've been in troops, I've traveled, and what sticks out is when I see that people aren't being heard, it's probably not the first time. It's probably not the second time. It's probably not the fifth time.
Yeah.
I just look at how people treat other people, and I'm not going to say I am the most intuitive person in the world, but I look and I listen and I observe. And when things don't feel right in here, I'm not about to like hold on to that and suffer in silence. Like, everyone deserves better than that. So for me, how are you responding to the feedback that I'm giving you also? That's going to be a huge indication of, you know, whether people are in a place to even receive feedback, be open to it, and just try to do better, you know, towards others. And obviously, you know, for those that aren't as familiar with me, I've recently, or in the past like year, I've been a lot more outspoken about my personal experiences, just at different shows with different producers and venues in general. And I just feel like it's really important because sometimes someone else may be suffering in silence. I know what that looks like. I know what that feels like, and it sucks. So regardless of how people want to react to things or, you know, work with me or not work with me for being so outspoken, I'm going to do it because I just feel like it's important on so many levels. So, you know, there's no clear, right, there's no like one answer, unfortunately, but like, I just think trust yourself, trust your gut, because our bodies also inform us of so much, sometimes before our brain does. So, so yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. That resonates a lot. So you mentioned a bit of traveling, and I know that we've spoken a bit about traveling outside of this conversation. Can you tell me about your experience with that and what insights that's given you?
So many. Woo! Traveling is so much fun. Like I love to travel in general. So anytime I have an opportunity to leave for a little bit, go see a place I love, or see a new place and just explore, I'm usually all about it. But obviously from a logistical standpoint, there's a lot more to think about. And, you know, one of the things that comes to mind for me first is safety. Whether it's the transportation that I have that's taking me where I'm going, do I feel good about getting on the road with that when I'm going to this thing and going to this place that maybe I'm not as familiar with? Do I know any people in between here and there that I can talk to if something happens? Like, or, you know, whatever, like shit comes up. And so I'm a preparer. I just like to think of everything I can before I hit the road. I think another big thing that comes to mind is this being an awesome opportunity to get to know new people, make new connections. And so one of the things that I like to do, if a producer I've never worked before decides, hey, I'm going to take a shot on you, I'm going to take a chance, and let's see what's up. I like to try to spend time with them if I can, even if it's just getting lunch or getting a cocktail or whatever. I think it's important to put yourself out there in a way that's a little more vulnerable so that people also see that you're a real person. Unless that's just not your bag and that's not what you want, you know,
Mhm.
like if you just want to get in and out, okay, nothing wrong with that either. But I love meeting new people, and I love being able to find ways to connect with others that may not have anything to do with burlesque. Maybe we
Mhm.
have other interests, and that's another reason that the stars aligned and now we're talking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it always goes further than just the traveling part. It's like, what am I going to get into when I get there? Because,
Hmm.
you know, sky's the limit, depending. Yeah, there's just, you know, there's just a lot more to think about. And I think the last thing is, it's more of a word of advice than like a story.
Hmm.
But when you're surrounded by people that you don't know well or that you don't know, do whatever you would at home to recenter yourself before you go kill it on stage.
Yeah.
Put your earphones on, like get in the zone, get into that place where you need to be to focus and ground yourself.
Hmm.
Because I think when you're seeing what everybody else has brought with them and you know their name and you know what they're about, sometimes that can get to you, and then that ends up being why you don't have a great time or
Hmm.
you don't have a good experience. Like you're thinking about shit that doesn't have anything to do with you. Think about what you are there to do at that time, you know? So yeah, that's it.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, great advice for anyone performing or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
I love that. Awesome. You've also been producing for a good while now.
Yeah,
Can you tell me about, what that shift has maybe felt like?
sure. So I first started producing back in 2017, I think.
Hmm.
Years are hard now. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm. Yes. Yes, I do.
they're so hard. Yeah, I think it was 2017. I just felt ready to do something a little bit different than what I was at least around or aware of. Like,
Hmm.
you know, my style of burlesque tends to be more neo. So there's going to be we're going to get away from maybe the classical burlesque music that you are expecting, or
Hmm.
even how we move and dance and storytell on the
Hmm.
stage is going to look a little bit different. And by a little, I mean a lot, in an amazing way, of course. But
Hmm.
and so yeah, I think I'm trying to remember where I was going with that. I was going somewhere really good. I lost my train of thought.
Um,
Where was I going
I
with
know you're
that?
talking about the neo
Yeah.
burlesque.
Yes. So I did a neo burlesque show, and then I did a funk show the next year.
Hmm.
But I still felt really green. I still felt like I was just throwing myself in the fire, which
Hmm.
I was. And then after that, I started traveling so much that I really didn't have time to produce.
Hmm.
So I took a step back, and then COVID happened,
Hmm.
and COVID's still happening.
Hmm.
However, I've at least been able to produce once in this past year.
Hmm.
Um, and it was a blurty burlesque show. For those who may not be familiar with that, a blurred is a black nerd. And it was a blurty cast, and it was a lot of fun. And I think this felt very different than anything else I've done or been a part of up until now. And I
Hmm.
think part of it just has to do with my focus being in a very different place,
Hmm.
and feeling more comfortable with what I'm doing, and confident with what I'm doing, to the extent that, you know, when I was hosting, there was a point in time where I kind of forgot that I was on stage. Like I just felt like I was having a conversation
Yeah.
with the audience, which feels great.
Hmm.
You know, sometimes it just, like, I'm just so in it. regardless, I'm the same way when it comes to performing too, where it's like, whoa, that happened and it's over already. Like where was I? I don't know. But yeah, this feels different, and this feels not necessarily more intentional, but I feel like it's probably a little more polished, and the vision of what I'm trying to do is a lot clearer.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe because of that, and people telling me that they want to see what I'm doing, that I'm allowing myself to take that in and not push it away.
Mm-hmm.
Just receiving the affirmations versus just like, oh no, I mean, no, thank you. Yes, I put my heart and my soul into this. I'm glad you saw that. I'm glad you felt that. So yeah, I think that's the difference. Like people see me, and I'm starting to see myself more. So
That's wonderful.
yeah.
And I would love to hear that vision that you talked about and what that looks like, if you were able to put that into words.
Sure. So one of the big components of what I've been doing and what I've been focusing on is centering queer, Black, and Brown performers, artists, that are in St. Louis or that are in the Midwest,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like we don't see them enough. And there's so many people in this city that could be brought into this magical world that we're trying to create. So I've been trying to, one, make sure that performers have more stages to perform on.
Mm-hmm.
Also just trying to share anytime someone else is doing something, because at least in my experience, I feel that word of mouth actually is an amazing thing. And that's how I've been able to do what I've done up until this point. It's really been word of mouth. It's really just been like having the ovarian fortitude to go up to people and be like, hey, take this flyer. You're going to love this. Come see this. Let's have a great time together. Yeah. So I think, that's something that comes to mind for me when it comes to that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Can I just pause and say that I'm very much going to steal ovarian fortitude? Love that.
That's what we say in this house. That's
I
what we
love
say
it.
here. Thank you. Yeah.
That's
It
amazing.
feels good.
Liz is asking, speaking of word of mouth, when and where is your next performance?
Oh, well, my next performance will be not until March. I'm taking a break next month. I'm just going to sleep the whole time. But the next performance will be March 11th. It'll actually be my next production. The production that's getting rescheduled from New Year's Eve. It's called The Midnight Hour. You can find more about it both on my IG page as well as on Facebook. There's a Facebook event there as well. So yeah, that's the next time I will be anywhere that an audience will see me, period. So yeah.
Exciting. Wonderful.
Yeah,
and we'll share that to the Triangle Wellness page as well.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Let's see here. I have some questions that I wanted to make sure I hit.
Okay.
So let's talk about community building and how that relates to your experience in the burlesque community.
It's been really awesome when it happens, because at least inside of the community, people also understand that additional struggle of just being a performer, and then being a queer performer, and then being a Black and brown performer, and then there's so many layers to it. So when you're able to find other people with similar experiences, just like out in the real world, it really makes you feel like, one, you're not alone, two, that you have experiences that are also really unique to you and those other people. And I feel like in my experience, that has brought me really close to a number of amazing people that I otherwise would have probably never been able to meet. I would probably never have known them in my lifetime if it hadn't been for this. So I think regardless of how it all ends, there's so much that I'm able to take away from this whole experience and journey and world. It also creates another support system in a way that people in my mogul life can't necessarily be for me. Again, I think it's related to experience, but yeah, I don't know what I would do without some of those people. I really don't, especially right now. You know, because there are some folks that I'm actually closer to that, you know, I've only met a couple of times, but we talk all the time than, you know, some people in my own city. But it's like those connections are where they're supposed to be. So now am I cultivating them? Am I planting those seeds to, you know, bloom something that's going to last a long time? Like, where do I want to be putting that energy in? And thankfully, it's people within the scene that can anchor me and keep me honest as well. So I just feel really grateful for them.
That's awesome. Yeah, I share that experience with drag, and I mean, I am not really performing anymore, and certainly not to your caliber, but yeah, but yes, I feel the same way, and I've had the experience of like being able to gain resources that I needed through like benefit shows for like my top surgery and stuff like that. Is that something that you know, something analogous that you see in burlesque as well?
I would say so, at least in my experience. But I think that's something that I like honed in on that I wanted to do at some point. So I want to say either at the beginning of the pandemic or right before it started, I started making a web series of just me dancing. Like, it was just literally supposed to be me keeping a record of me moving around versus, you know, being stuck on the couch for another week. And then out of nowhere, people started sending me money. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's cool too. I'm never going to be mad about someone sending me money. But what else can I do with it? Because I can't go anywhere anyway.
Right.
And then I started thinking about all of the causes, all of the GoFundMes, all of the, you know, nonprofits here that could use that money right now. Right. So I started donating all of it. I'm like, hey, you know, if you guys are going to keep giving me money, then I will keep giving you art. And then, you know, that art allowed me to start, you know, sending money to nonprofits and just like people who needed it in community. So I just never thought that would be one of the benefits of being a part of this either. But I'm like, oh shit, it's my art. I can do anything with it that I want to do. It's just figuring out what I want to do with it. And so giving back is something that I also want to try to incorporate a little bit more. I just feel like it's going to take a little bit more time until I can really focus on it to make it maybe more sustainable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My cat is demanding attention right now.
Sorry. Mean, you gotta, hey, sometimes the baby just needs some love, you know?
But yes. Let's see here. So if there is somebody within the performing community, or perhaps someone who's just an enthusiast that wants to be a better ally to you and your art and people like you, do you have any starting points or advice for people in that situation?
Yeah, money, to be honest with you. Money. Yeah. Because if you're really down for the cause, and if you can, equity is going to be in my top 3 almost always, at least for the foreseeable future. So whether it's that, whether it's supporting whatever art someone is making, whether it's showing up at shows when you can and it's safe and all of that good stuff, whether it's again, word of mouth, telling other people, paying attention to when people are speaking up and speaking out as well, because silence is violence. And
Hmm.
I will say that till the day I die. So I think those are good places to start, and just sharing what you, again, just sharing what you can. The more people that know about, someone or their art or what they're doing, the
Hmm.
more probability we have of filling venues that are have a Black producer or a entirely BIPOC show or whatever. Like, show up, speak
Hmm.
up. Um, if your heart is telling you should probably do it, then do it.
Yeah,
you know yeah, but I'd say that's a good place to start.
absolutely. Those are very easy, actionable
Easy,
suggestions.
right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Awesome. Um, you mentioned um, drawing inspiration from a lot of different sources.
Hmm.
Can you, I guess, talk about any of those particular sources, like
Oh,
favorite music?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. um I'm inspired by so many things,
Hmm.
but music is definitely a big one.
Hmm.
I love sexy music. Honestly, it makes me move all the time. And I'm like, I can't help it. I am just a slinky bitch. Like, that's just what it is.
Hmm.
I can dibble and dabble in other things, but when I hear something that makes me like just want to move slowly, I'm like, that's it. That's it right there. So music is huge.
Hmm.
Um, Movies, media in general,
Hmm.
honestly, super nerdy shit too.
Yeah.
Anime is huge for me.
Yeah.
I love anime. It's really been a part of my life forever.
Hmm.
And honestly, my child and teenager imagination, because it makes me feel like I can do all the things that I imagined in my head when I was younger,
Hmm.
and people will like come and see me do it.
Yeah.
Like, people actually want to see what's in my brain, which is kind of cool. You know what I mean? Like, um, so a lot of times I may be inspired specifically by lyrics. Like, if there are certain words that kind of are highlighted for me when I hear something or
Hmm.
a melody, I'm just like, ooh, I imagine my body doing this. Or,
Hmm.
ooh, this is the story that I want to tell related to the song or related to these lyrics or whatever. So I'm inspired by a lot of things. Also, clothes. Clothes
Yeah.
are a big one, because if I can see myself in it, I'm sure the next stop is just imagining what I'm doing with it. Like,
Hmm.
so there are a number of things that get to me, but normally it's the music, the bass.
I love that.
Yeah.
Where has been your favorite place of all time to perform?
Ooh. Um, Honestly, I love performing in Louisville, Kentucky. It's
Yeah.
one of my favorite places to go. But I know part of it just has to do with all the people that I've been able to meet when
Hmm.
I've gone there, when I've visited. Everyone's so freaking nice and
Hmm.
southern, and so yeah, Kentucky is honestly one of my favorite places. um I do love going to Indianapolis. This past December was my first time in Indy for a number of years at this point.
Hmm.
um Kansas City always shows me love, though. For a
Hmm.
long time, Kansas City felt like my home away from home. Like, I was
Yeah.
there a lot. But again, it's also related to the connections that I've made. So I feel like maybe that's a more integral part of what's a good place for me to perform.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So it's really the connection is really what
yeah,
makes the venue.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
That makes
I
a lot
like
of
I like
sense.
people who are just like chilling and nerdy like me, and just awkward. Maybe just give me a little bit of awkward, and I know I'll be okay.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I'm like, oh God, am I in the right place? I don't know. So yeah.
Hmm. Um, you've mentioned a few things,
Mm-hmm.
a few feelings that lead me to this next question, and that's I feel like imposter syndrome is
Mm.
just a pretty common experience for a lot of people, and I'm
Oh,
curious to hear about your journey with that and
mm.
how you deal with that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't think this question can ever be answered too many times.
Hmm.
Because we're human, number one, and we're not perfect all the time. And our brains can trick us into believing so many things about ourselves that are absolutely not true. Um, so I think for me, when it comes to imposter syndrome, it took me a long time to get to this point. And I think to a certain extent it has just as much to do with how I navigated like everyday life
Hmm.
as it did to with like how well I was performing. Because this whole time when I really look back and I reflect on my experience, I've always done well.
Hmm.
I've always done well, regardless of whether I saw it at the time,
Hmm.
right? I did well for myself for just starting. I did well for myself for having all of these new experiences that not any, most people don't know how to navigate in the first place. Like, we're just trying to make things work, right? So, giving myself grace is very new.
Hmm.
Um, but I think if I know what my expectation is for myself,
Hmm.
and what success means for me, I think that I think that helps a lot versus trying to hold myself to a higher standard for who knows what reason, or starting to focus in too much on what other people are doing, or their accolades or accomplishments and everything else. And I know that is hard. I know
Hmm.
that's really hard not to do. But a huge piece of what I think has helped me is honestly staying off social media more.
Yeah.
100% staying off of social media more for me, because I'm not just scrolling at all of these amazing things that it seems like people are doing all of the time, every day, all day, that we know realistically, logically, that is not possible or true.
Right.
Right? Like, we know people actually have jobs and they have to work, and know they're not always on a beach, and know they're not always doing a photo shoot.
Hmm.
But especially in the performance art world, that's where we that's where we show our art, right? So if that's
Yeah.
all we're seeing all day,
Yeah.
our idea of what's real can sometimes be a little warped. And
Hmm.
that can be damaging and unhealthy and overwhelming. So as far as, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but in my
Hmm.
experience, go take a nap, read a book,
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying? Like, go outside, get some fresh air, do something else,
Yeah.
so that you're not just worried about things that really don't matter. They don't
Hmm.
matter. They're not gonna, it has nothing to do with your actual performance. You're gonna be fine.
Hmm.
Focus on what it is that you're trying to do.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think I needed to hear that.
We all need to hear that.
So I appreciate that very much.
Hmm.
That's awesome. Speaking of books, do you have a favorite book? This is usually our last question, but I just am curious.
So right now,
Hmm.
I have two favorite books. It's and they're probably not going to be what some people are expecting, but I'm full of surprises.
Absolutely. You can contain
Sometimes I think I'm
multitudes.
funny. So one is called House Magic.
Okay.
I can't remember the author, but it's literally that. It's about house magic and how to utilize magic, the magic that's really just inside of you,
Hmm.
to make your environment and your surrounding exactly what you need it to be to feel peace around you, to feel clarity, to make it feel like home. So
Hmm.
that's been a big one. Um, and there's another one. Oh, the author is Maya Spalter, and I can't remember if she still works there or not, but she at least used to work at one of the oldest metaphysical shops in all of New York.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, when I delve deep, I get deep, and so that's where I'm at. Just really pulling magic that I didn't realize I already had in me, and leaning into that a little bit more. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm into right now.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about doing an hour. We have about 15 more minutes. Is there any other topic that we haven't touched on yet that you want to dive into?
Hmm. Um, we could talk about. I'm trying to think because I feel like it's related, but I think talking a little bit more about the creative process.
Yeah.
I feel like I could delve into that a little bit more or be
Okay.
a little bit more granular.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think what I was saying before was a little more surface level in terms of like music or art or da 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 da. But when I thought about it, I'm like, but there's so much more to that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the questions that I get asked specifically is how to like create an act.
Hmm.
I think sometimes people struggle with focusing on one aspect of it and then just kind of getting overwhelmed by
Hmm.
that or putting too much attention on that. Um, so one of the things that I like to do is if excuse me, if music is my motivator, if music is my inspiration for a piece that I'm working on, I try to get to a point where I can see the act in my head first.
Hmm.
So before I try to conceptualize a costume, before I start thinking about like the logistics part of it, like how am I going to take this off? How am I going to, make this reveal or whatever? Like I want to be able to imagine it from start to finish in my mind.
Hmm.
And so for me, I think because I do that first, that allows me to, um, by the time I'm ready to put the act together, I've already spent so much time listening to the song. I know it like the back of my hand and I hate it. Honestly, like I like to get to that point because that means I know every little blip in it. I know every little tiny sound, where it is. And if let's say I turn on the song and I go to a random part of the song, I should know exactly what I should be doing at that moment.
Hmm.
So I think for me, getting something down, even if it's like loosely choreographed or what have you, is just really important. Like
Hmm.
I know the song, I know how long it is, I know where things are. Let me sort of fill in the rest of this now.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so that's how I like to do it if I start with music. If I start with a costume, then I like to think of what does this remind me of, or what story does this color tell?
Hmm.
Or I'm trying to think of another good example. Do you have something like that where you start with either a costume or you start with a song and build from there?
Yeah. I guess some of my favorite acts, I guess I would say, start kind of with like a concept or a message.
Mm,
Um, like my number one all-time favorite act that I did was about like my trans identity, and I took
mm,
different pieces from Halsey was the artist I picked that it just kind of fit, and then different spoken word
mhm,
poetry,
mm,
and like clipped all that together, and then the the act and everything that I was doing was served that message as well. So,
yeah.
but that's that it worked well a couple of times.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. No, I get that. I totally get that. And that's something else. I'm glad you said that because I think that's something else that people, I don't know, I feel like for a long time I felt like I had to hold on to acts the way they were,
Hmm.
even though they weren't working for me after a while.
Hmm.
And I was like, man, why is this like why can I not get it together? And I think it's just because we're also evolving all the time. And so
Hmm.
what felt good at that time or what um felt like the direction you wanted to go with it has since changed. And
Hmm.
I think that's another big one. Um and then when I start to think about costuming, I think about, okay, how much time and effort and money do I want to invest in something,
Hmm.
right? I feel like that's something that folks still kind of struggle with a little bit,
Hmm.
where you buy this expensive costume, for instance, and it ended up not being worth it, for example, right?
Hmm.
Um, I'm just kind of at a place where I'm like, you are going to pay for yourself. I don't know exactly how, but I need to figure that out because I need it to be worth that time and energy.
Yeah.
Money, especially the money part, just because sometimes we put the cart before the horse.
Hmm.
And then it's like, oh man, I put so much into this thing that I'm gonna do one time, and I have there's nothing else that I can imagine doing with this, or like spinning it into something else, and that is when things just, I don't know. I feel like that can get to you as a performer.
Hmm.
Things are going out but not coming back in the way you want them to, you know.
Yes.
So yeah,
That,
it's an investment. It is, to a certain extent. It is.
mm,
I won't lie to you.
for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. That's all I got. That's all I could think of.
Okay. Awesome. Well, so closing thoughts.
Mm.
I just want to share real quick that like if anybody that's still here missed the beginning of this, I'm going to have this available on our Patreon. Be sure to check out Rose's um, March 11th show
Yes,
and say the name of it again for me. I'm sorry.
that's okay. The Midnight Hour.
Midnight
Rosewood
Hour.
presents the Midnight Hour. Yes.
Correct. Thank you. And we'll
Yeah.
share that on the Facebook page. But yeah, thank you so much for coming and chatting with me.
Yeah.
I greatly appreciate it, and I hope you have
Thanks
a
for having me.
good rest of your evening.
You too.